Few fantasy heroes have left a mark on pop culture quite like Arnold Schwarzenegger's mighty barbarian. Decades after he first wielded the sword that made him a global action star, the legendary actor is preparing to return to the world of Conan the Barbarian. Even more exciting for fans, the revival is reportedly being developed with a filmmaker associated with the adrenaline-fueled Mission Impossible franchise. For longtime fans of the original fantasy epic, the news feels like a long-awaited moment. The character of Conan the Barbarian helped define an era of sword and sorcery cinema in the early 1980s, and Schwarzenegger's performance remains one of the most iconic action roles in film history. Now, with a visionary filmmaker known for crafting spectacular blockbuster action, Hollywood appears ready to reintroduce the legendary warrior to a new generation. The barbarian who built an action legend. Before he was a global political figure, a blockbuster star, or even a household name, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a rising bodybuilder searching for his breakthrough role. That opportunity arrived in 1982 with Conan the Barbarian, directed by John Milius and produced by the influential filmmaker Dino De Laurentiis. The film was based on the pulp fantasy stories created by Robert E. Howard, whose tales of savage landscapes, ancient gods, and brutal warriors had already captivated readers for decades. When the film premiered, it immediately stood apart from typical fantasy adventures of the time. Instead of whimsical magic and fairy tale charm, Conan the Barbarian delivered a darker, more mythic world. Brutal battles, philosophical narration, and sweeping landscapes gave the story an epic tone rarely seen in fantasy cinema. At the center of it all was Schwarzenegger, whose imposing physical presence made him a perfect embodiment of Conan's primal strength. Though still early in his acting career, the role launched him into global fame. A franchise is born. The success of the 1982 film led to a sequel, Conan the Destroyer, released in 1984. While the second installment leaned more toward traditional adventure and lighter fantasy elements, it still helped cement Conan as one of the defining cinematic heroes of the decade. Schwarzenegger's portrayal turned the character into a pop culture icon, influencing everything from comic books and video games to role-playing games and fantasy films that followed. However, despite the early success of the series, the franchise eventually faded from the spotlight. Over the years, Hollywood made several attempts to revive the character, but none matched the impact of the original films. The 2011 attempt that didn't work. In 2011, the character returned to theaters with a reboot simply titled Conan the Barbarian, starring Jason Momoa. While the film featured impressive visual effects and large-scale action sequences, it struggled to connect with audiences. Critics argued that the movie lacked the mythic atmosphere and philosophical tone that made the original so memorable. The film underperformed at the box office, and plans for a sequel were quickly abandoned. Yet despite that setback, fans continued to hope that Schwarzenegger might one day return to the role that helped define his career. The long-rumored return. For years, discussions about a potential Schwarzenegger-led Conan sequel circulated in Hollywood. One project, often referred to as the Legend of Conan, was rumored to bring the character back as an aging warrior king. The concept drew inspiration from films like Unforgiven, where older heroes confront the legacy of their violent pasts. Schwarzenegger himself repeatedly expressed interest in revisiting the role. In interviews, he often spoke about how Conan remained one of the characters closest to his heart. Despite the enthusiasm, the project remained stuck in development limbo. Until now. Enter the Mission Impossible connection. The latest development has renewed excitement across Hollywood. The Conan revival is reportedly moving forward with a filmmaker associated with the blockbuster Mission Impossible franchise. That connection suggests the project could combine the raw fantasy atmosphere of the original with the kind of high-energy action and cinematic scale modern audiences expect. The Mission Impossible films, led by Tom Cruise, have become famous for their elaborate stunts, globe-trotting adventures, and practical action sequences. If even a portion of that filmmaking philosophy makes its way into the Conan revival, the result could be a visually spectacular fantasy epic. Why Conan still matters. In today's entertainment landscape, fantasy stories dominate film and television. From massive franchises like Game of Thrones to epic cinematic universes like The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, audiences have shown a huge appetite for worlds filled with magic, mythology, and heroic warriors. Yet Conan remains unique among fantasy heroes. Unlike many modern protagonists, Conan isn't a chosen one destined to save the world. He is a survivor, a warrior shaped by hardship, revenge, and relentless determination. That raw, primal storytelling style is exactly what made the original film so powerful. And it's a tone that many fans believe modern fantasy has lost. Schwarzenegger's enduring legacy. For Schwarzenegger, returning to Conan would represent more than just another role. It would be a full-circle moment in a career that spans bodybuilding championships, Hollywood blockbusters, and political leadership. After his breakout as Conan, Schwarzenegger went on to become one of the biggest action stars in history. Films like The Terminator, Predator, Total Recall, and True Lies helped define the action genre throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Even today, his influence remains enormous. Returning to the role that started it all would be a powerful tribute to that legacy. What the new film could explore. If the revival follows the rumored Legend of Conan concept, the story could focus on an older, wiser barbarian reflecting on his past battles. This type of narrative would allow Schwarzenegger to bring new emotional depth to the character. Instead of a young warrior seeking revenge, audiences could see a king facing the consequences of a lifetime of war. Such a story could explore themes of legacy, leadership, and redemption. It would also allow the film to balance intense action with deeper character development. A perfect moment for a Conan comeback. Hollywood has recently embraced legacy sequels that bring iconic characters back decades later. Films like Top Gun, Maverick prove that audiences are eager to revisit beloved heroes when the story is handled with care and respect. A new Conan film could follow a similar path. By combining the mythic tone of the original with modern filmmaking techniques, the project could introduce the character to a new generation while honoring longtime fans. The challenge is ahead. Reviving Conan will not be easy. Fantasy filmmaking has evolved dramatically since the 1980s. Audiences now expect vast worlds, complex characters, and stunning visual effects. At the same time, the film must avoid losing the gritty simplicity that made the original so powerful. Balancing those elements will be one of the project's biggest challenges. Yet with Schwarzenegger involved, and a filmmaker experienced in crafting large-scale action spectacles, many fans believe the revival has a strong chance of succeeding. Fans are already excited. As news of the revival spreads online, excitement among fans is rapidly growing. For decades, Conan has remained one of the most beloved figures in fantasy storytelling. The idea of Schwarzenegger returning to wield the sword once again feels almost mythic in itself. For longtime fans who grew up watching the original films, the announcement is both nostalgic and thrilling. A barbarian's legacy reborn. More than 40 years after he first stepped onto the screen as Conan, Arnold Schwarzenegger may be preparing for one of the most remarkable comebacks in movie history. The combination of his iconic presence and a filmmaker experienced in blockbuster action could deliver the kind of epic fantasy adventure audiences have been waiting for. Whether the film becomes a gritty character study or a sweeping cinematic spectacle, one thing is clear: Conan's legend is far from finished. And if the project succeeds, the barbarian who helped define fantasy cinema could once again conquer the big screen.